started with the screech of tires. One moment, I was lost in the sound of my brother Justin's voice bragging about his college acceptance letters. Then the world-shattered metal glass fire. I woke up to fluorescent lights and pain, but not to the relief of my family. My mother barely looked at me, her cold words the only thing that reached me. I was alive, but to them, I was just another problem, a mess to clean up. I don't remember much of the crash, just the terrible sounds, metal twisting glass, cracking my body, jerking violently. When I finally woke up, everything felt wrong. The sterile smell of antiseptic hit me first, then the hum of fluorescent lights. My body was foreign, like it belonged to someone else. A nurse, Melissa, was standing there checking my vitals. Her kind eyes met mine, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. At least someone seemed to care. But then they walked in my parents. My mother, flawless as always, her hair perfectly styled, barely looked at me. She stood at the foot of the bed, her eyes flicking to the doctor, and said, "She's awake." Not to me, but to the doctor. No warmth in her voice, no concern in her eyes. My father didn't say a word. He stood behind her like a shadow, not even bothering to look me in the eye. He wasn't upset or relieved. He wasn't worried. He just looked tired. Tired like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. The doctor smiled at me, trying to offer some comfort. "You've been through a major trauma," he said, his voice all professional and detached. "Madison, you lost a kidney in the accident, but you're stable now." A kidney. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. The pain was so sharp, it almost didn't seem real. I tried to ask about Justin, but my mother cut me off before I could get the words out. "He's fine," she said with a sigh, like I was asking about some insignificant thing. "A few scratches. The car's totaled, of course." The words hung there. No concern about me. No mention of the fact that I was the one lying in the bed, hooked up to machines my body wrecked. No words of comfort or relief. Just the cold statement that Justin, their golden child, was fine. I was the problem. I was the one keeping them here. The doctor seemed more concerned with the paperwork than with me. The room felt emptier, quieter, the weight of their indifference pressing down on me. I wanted to scream, to shout, to make them see me, but I couldn't. I couldn't even move. I was trapped in this body that no longer felt like mine, in a world that seemed to have forgotten about me. In the days that followed, nothing changed. My parents came, but only when they had to. They talked about insurance, about discharge papers, about when I could leave. Justin never visited. Not once. Not even a call. I told myself it was guilt he couldn't face me after the accident. But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't just guilt. It was something older. Something deeper. He had always been the favorite. I had always been invisible. And in that hospital room, I realized just how invisible I really was. It was late and the hospital was silent except for the soft beeping of machines. I was awake, pain keeping me from sleep, when I heard the hushed voices outside my room. At first, I thought it was just another nurse or another doctor checking in, but then I recognized the voices, my mother's, my father's, and someone else's. A man, his voice cold and detached. I couldn't move, couldn't make a sound, but I heard every word. "The legal fees for the street racing charge are $150,000, my father said. His voice was thin, tired. He wasn't angry. He wasn't worried. He just sounded defeated. His scholarship is in jeopardy, his future. My mother interrupted, her voice sharp. "There's a loophole," she said. since she's still a minor and medically incapacitated. Parental consent for necessary procedures is absolute. My heart began to race. Something was wrong. Something I didn't understand, but I knew enough to feel it. The next words froze me. "You're suggesting a transplant for your son," the man said. His tone was matter-of-fact clinical. "For a kidney?" "Yes," my mother replied, her voice almost too calm. "We need it." I held my breath, every muscle in my body locked in place. They were talking about me, about my kidney, but it didn't make sense. They couldn't be. I wasn't a donor. I was their daughter. My body wasn't just some medical resource to be used and discarded. The man cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "A kidney transplant for your son is hardly a necessary procedure. He needs it," my mother said, again, her voice cool without a trace of hesitation. "She's already damaged goods." Damaged goods. The words cut through me like a blade. They weren't just talking about my body, they were talking about my life. I had been nothing. To them, nothing more than a vessel for their plans. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't even a person. I was just a spare part. My father's voice echoed in my head, his defeat sinking into my chest. "What kind of future does she have?" he asked, almost as if he were asking a rhetorical question. "One kidney, a scarred torso, she's ruined." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw myself out of the bed, to run, to tear them apart with every ounce of anger I had. But I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I was frozen, paralyzed by the terror of what they were planning. They were willing to trade my life to save his, to sacrifice me. But then, something inside me shifted. It was like a switch had flipped. The terror didn't go away, but it was no longer the only thing I felt. A cold resolve began to replace the fear settling deep in my chest, hardening my bones. This wasn't just happening to me. They weren't just going to take my kidney and send me off like I was nothing. No, I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't going to let them use me like this. I didn't know how I was going to fight it, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be their sacrifice. I wasn't going to be a spare part in their world of luxury and entitlement. They had taken so much from me already, but I was still breathing. I still had a chance, and as long as I had that chance, I wasn't going to give up. I didn't move. I stayed completely still, pretending to sleep, letting their footsteps fade down the hall. The terror still gripped me, but it no longer had control. A plan was forming in my mind, a way out. The first step had already been taken. I wasn't going to die, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The next morning, when Melissa came in to check my IV, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't say a word about what I had overheard. I couldn't, not yet. The words were too monstrous, too impossible to speak, but I didn't need to. I just looked at her. I held her gaze and let a single tear slip down my cheek. She saw it. She knew. Without a word, without asking anything, she reached out and took my hand. The small, simple gesture spoke volumes. She understood. And in that moment, I understood something too. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Melissa was the first person who looked at me like I was a person, not a problem. She wasn't like the others. She didn't treat me like a broken thing to be fixed and discarded. Every time she came in, she had a soft smile, a kind word. I didn't have to pretend with her. I didn't have to hide the fear, the anger, or the loneliness that gnawed at me. I think she knew something was wrong before I even had the words for it. She never asked about my family, never made me feel like I had to explain anything. She just listened quietly as I drifted in and out of consciousness. One morning after another, Sleepless night, filled with nothing but the sound of machines and the distant voices of my parents talking business outside. I felt something inside me break. The weight of everything was too much. My body, the pain, the fear, it was suffocating. But it was the realization that they had tried to take my kidney that pushed me to the edge. When Melissa came in, she was her usual calm, steady self. She adjusted my IV, checked my vitals, but this time something was different. I couldn't keep it in anymore. I had to do something, say something. I needed to reach out to tell someone who would understand. I couldn't speak. I couldn't form the words. They felt too heavy, too much for my throat, but I didn't need words. I reached up, trembling, my hand shaking, and I touched hers. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but it was everything. I was asking for help without saying a word. Her eyes softened instantly, and I saw the flicker of something in her gaze, concern, understanding. She didn't pull away. She didn't question. She just held my hand in return, her grip gentle but firm. In that moment, it felt like she was saying, "I see you. You're not alone." I didn't know what I expected from her. I didn't expect her to solve anything or make it all go away. But just that touch, that simple act of solidarity was enough to keep me going. In that brief, quiet moment, I knew that someone cared, that I wasn't invisible to everyone. Melissa didn't say anything after that. She didn't need to. We didn't speak about my family or what I had overheard, but in her eyes, I saw the promise that she would do what she could. She would protect me in whatever small way she could from the indifference of the people who were supposed to love me. It was a quiet act, but it meant everything. She had no obligation to help me, no reason to stand by me, but she did, and that gave me the strength to keep fighting. The fear was still there, still clawing at me, but now I wasn't just trapped in that sterile, lonely room. I had someone in my corner, someone who saw me as more than just a problem to be solved. That was enough. For now, that was enough. 3 weeks later, the court proceedings were over and I was officially emancipated. No more hospital rooms, no more machines, no more fake smiles and cold indifference. I was free. I was finally free. It was like stepping out of a prison I hadn't realized I'd been trapped in for so long. The first thing I did, the very first thing I had the power to do, was change my name. Madison was a name tied to a life I no longer wanted, a life I had to leave behind. I wasn't just trying to escape my past, I was claiming my future. Avery, a name that felt new, strong, and full of possibilities. It was mine, and it felt like the first true choice I had ever made for myself. I walked out of the courthouse holding a small envelope with my new name on the official documents. The sun felt different on my skin, like it was the first time I was really seeing the world. It wasn't some blurry background to a life that wasn't mine. This time it was my life, and it was all ahead of me. I moved into a small apartment. It was tiny, cramped even, but it was mine. I didn't need anything more. I didn't need anything except space. Space to breathe, space to grow, space to figure out who I was without the weight of my past bearing down on me. The bed was lumpy, the walls bare, but there was a sense of freedom in that simplicity. I got a job at a local bookstore. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I worked nights, saved every dollar, and refused any help that came with strings attached. The independence I had fought for so long was now mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. I didn't need their money or their charity. I didn't need them. For the first time, I was building something that was mine completely and undeniably mine. The foundation was shaky at first, but it was strong enough for me to stand on my own 2 feet. The girl who had once been invisible was now the one who controlled her fate, and nothing, no one was going to take that from me. Years had passed since the crash, since the hospital, since I had walked away from everything I used to be. I had rebuilt myself piece by piece, but when I saw Justin again, everything about him still screamed entitlement. His suit was ill-fitting. His face, pale, haggard, he was a shadow of the golden boy he once thought he was. But even in this state, there was something desperate about him. Something I hadn't seen before. He didn't recognize me at first. How could he? The girl he had left for dead in that hospital bed was gone. Now, I sat at the head of a sleek, polished mahogany table as the CEO of Aura Therapeutics, in full control of my own destiny. He was no longer the one with the power. It was my turn. I let him speak. He was all nerves, stumbling over his words, pitching some half-baked idea for a piece of medical software. He blamed bad luck market forces, anything but himself. It was pathetic, really. He painted himself as a victim of circumstances, just like he had back then, when I was the one who had taken the fall for his recklessness. I let him finish the silence hanging in the air like a weight. The power in the room was mine, but I didn't need to say anything yet. I let him squirm for a moment, watching his nervous glances, his shifting weight. He was sweating now, the air conditioning doing nothing to ease his discomfort. I almost wanted to laugh, but I kept it in. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained, forcing a smile. So what do you think? I leaned forward, not with anger, but with the calmness of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. It's an interesting proposal, Justin, I said, my voice steady, controlled. But before we talk about your company, I'm more interested in your history. His eyes flickered with confusion, and I could see it, the recognition starting to creep in the flicker of fear. My family, he asked almost nervously. They're fine, why? No siblings, I pressed gently. I hear you had a sister. His face went white. He shifted in his seat, and for the first time I saw the cracks in the armor. I had a sister. We're not in touch. It was a long time ago. I leaned in, my voice sharp as a scalpel. A car accident, wasn't it you were driving? She was critically injured, lost a kidney. His whole body went stiff. He stared at me, eyes wide, as recognition hit him like a freight train. He opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. Madison, he whispered, and the name sounded like a curse, like it burned his tongue. I stood up, not in anger, but with the calm certainty of someone who had already won. I turned away from him, walking to the window. I wasn't interested in his excuses anymore. I wasn't interested in anything he had to say. You didn't visit, I said, still facing the window. You didn't even call. You stood by while I was being cut open, and you did nothing. You did nothing because it benefited you. I could hear him in the background scrambling for an explanation, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The silence spoke louder than anything he could say. Finally, I turned back to face him. You weren't just a bystander, Justin. You signed your name on my death warrant by staying silent. He looked at me, defeated, the last remnants of his arrogance gone. He was a broken man now. I didn't know. I didn't care. Now let's talk about this grant, I said, returning to the business at hand. The Aura Progenitor Grant wasn't created for people like you. It's for victims, Justin, not villains. I pressed a button on the intercom. Security, please escort Mr. Liberwan out. I watched as the guards entered the room, and with one last look, Justin was gone, just like he'd been all those years ago. His desperation, his failure, it meant nothing to me. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about some childish need for payback. It was about closing a chapter in my life. It was about finally standing on my own, fully in control, and knowing that I had nothing left to prove to anyone. The war was over, and I had won. Avery's journey is a powerful reminder that no matter how broken we are, we can always rebuild ourselves. From surviving the unimaginable to taking control of her own future, she showed that strength doesn't come from others. It comes from within. If you found her story inspiring, don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, your past doesn't define you. It's what you do with the present and future that matters most.